Maybe your dog can, maintain his obedience, but that doesn't mean that in his heart he's having a good time, and that's not going to create a good relationship. If you want a good relationship, you have to learn how to pick up on what your dog is telling you and do the appropriate thing. That's how you build trust with your dog. Knowing how to read your dog isn't something that really comes naturally. And when we talk about the Cane Corso, a lot of people describe this dog as being protective in nature, which makes sense because they were bred to guard land, livestock, and their people. The Cane Corso is strong-willed and very imponent. These are the reasons why I personally love the breed. However, these are also the reasons that many first-time or inexperienced owners might find themselves overwhelmed in terms of their upbringing. Today I wanted to talk about this topic because I feel this really big responsibility to advocate for the breed as an owner of 2 Cane Corsos, and I never want people to fall victims on a glamorized version of what dog ownership is. And I really want to help people understand how to read their dogs better and not just label a dog as being protective when in reality there could be some underlying behavioral issues. For our subscribers, welcome back to the channel. Nice to see you here. And for any new people that are arriving, this is kind of awkward. We've never seen each other, but if you clicked on this video, it's because maybe you found it interesting. So yeah, I hope you stick around, and I hope that this content resonates with you, and hopefully you subscribe. So yeah, thank you so much if you are already subscribed. I appreciate all 13,000 of you, so thank you so much. But yeah, let's get on to this topic of understanding how to read your dog's body language, specifically the Cane Corso. So going back to our topic of Cane Corsos and whether your Corso may be overprotective, I would agree to a certain extent that Corsos are protective in nature. They are aloof, when it comes to strangers. They don't really like unfamiliar situations. However, as a dog trainer, when I hear somebody say, my dog is protective, that begs me to ask a number of questions, because what might be protective to me might not be the same thing to you. So for example, when you describe your dog as protective, does that mean that your dog is barking on the leash when you guys go on walks, that it's lunging when it sees people or other dogs? Does it mean that nobody can approach you when you are with your dog without your dog snapping at them? Those are all things that we need to consider when it comes to describing our dog as protective. So I wanted to make this super easy for you guys, and I want to help out anybody who's having a hard time deciphering and discerning what their dog's body language means. I've broken down the topics that I'm going to talk to you guys about in 3 main parts. So the first part that we're going to cover is temperament. Temperament plays a huge role in your dog's overall behavior, how they interact with the world, and this is influenced by genetics. So for example, Dante and Peach come from the same mom, but they have different dads. So Peachy is extremely friendly, extremely confident. She is like the type of girl that has no worries in her head, and she sees something, she wants to do it. So Peach is that kind of dog. If you meet her, it's like she literally has no care in the world. She has never seen evil in her life. It's like she's a little princess, okay? And she just loves to have fun. She loves to love on people. She loves to get pet. Now, Dante, on the other hand, he doesn't really care about other people. If it was up to him, he just goes, does what he needs to do, and leaves it at that. So when we have people over, Dante will go and sniff them, but that's about it. He's not really one to go and, try to get attention from a stranger. That's not the type of dog that he is. And I bring this up because I wanted to emphasize the importance of genetics and how that plays a role in your dog's temperament. So even though Dante and Peach both have the same mom, they have a different dad. Peach's dad super friendly, very, very, very similar to Peach's personality. Never got a chance to meet Dante's father, but he's nothing like Peach's dad. Dante is nothing like Peach's dad. So that is just to show you guys how this is really important, especially when you're picking your puppy. If you want a dog that's more like a Peach, that she, you know, literally doesn't really care about strangers. However, she will bark if she hears like a weird noise outside. She'll alert you if she, you know, sees somebody, you know, staring for too long. She'll definitely, her Corso will kick in. However, as soon as, you know, that person passes by or starts baby talking to her, she's like, oh, okay, you're actually really cool. So if you want a Peachy, then when you're speaking to your breeder, you have to be very clear that you want a dog that is very social. Now, if you want something more like a Dante, maybe you spend a lot of time home alone and you want a dog that is less likely to try to have interactions with people, and you like to have the idea of having a dog that's going to be, you know, taking care of you and doing their job in that way, then maybe you want a Dante. So those are things that really do play a role in your dog's behavior down the line. So when you think about your dog and you think about how, you know, protective they are, consider, hey, how are my dog's parents? You know, how are the other siblings in the litter? Because even though Dante and Peach are both Corsos, they differ greatly in personality. Depending on your dog's personality, the way that you are going to treat your dog is going to differ as well. So for example, my treatment of Dante and Peach differ. So Dante is more assertive than Peach. He is more likely to push his limits. So with Dante, he has a firmer hand. And when I mean firmer hand, I don't mean like he's getting alpha rolled. I don't mean that I'm like yelling at him more or anything like that. It just means that if he doesn't sit for me the first time, like we cannot let that go. Like I can't let that go. Now with Peach on the other hand, she is more likely not to sit the first time that I tell her because she's distracted, not because she's actively not trying to do it. Dante's very stubborn. So that's one thing that, you know, is going to really affect the way that you interact with your dog, that you treat your dog and your relationship with your dog. So now, although Dante is very assertive, stubborn, that doesn't mean that as an owner, I will allow for misbehavior or I will allow for excessive barking. If I order pizza and the pizza guy rings the doorbell, I'll let Dante bark, you know, it's his job. He's doing what he has to do. If I were to, you know, have him on a leash and go say hi to somebody and he decides to growl, that behavior is unacceptable. So that is something that you have to learn to distinguish with your dog. When is your dog doing his job and when is your dog misbehaving? And I've gotten a lot of, you know, DMs from you guys saying that sometimes you have a hard time figuring that out. And for me, an easy way for me to pinpoint if something is too much is the moment it gets excessive and my dog is not able to be redirected. If your dog isn't able to be redirected mid-bark, then that means that he has passed this threshold and it's excessive. He's not supposed to be acting that way. So what you have to do as the owner is consider your dog's temperament, right? And don't let it get to a point that they pass their threshold. Make sure that you are practicing good behavior, calm behavior with your dog and rewarding that so that it doesn't get to that point. Because what you want to do is build a lot of really good habits, and that has been very key and very important in Dante's upbringing, especially when dealing with the issues of reactivity that he has had in the past. So that is something that you guys have to think about. Now, if you have a dog that's like Peach, for example, Peach will probably bark at a stranger, but as soon as the stranger's like baby talks her and as soon as they give her the okay, she stops because that's in her nature, you know? I don't think Peach has ever gotten excessive with barking. So she's just an easier dog in that sense. Just because your dog may be a little bit more assertive or might have a stronger will or be stronger in character, a little bit more stubborn, that doesn't mean that you should allow for misbehavior. So the second part And understanding your dog and knowing how to read your dog and being able to decipher whether they are being too protective or not is learning to pick up on their body language and learning how to manage the situation your dog might be in depending on their body language. So let me explain to you what I mean. When I first got Dante, this was really hard for me because it's not something that comes naturally. As humans, we communicate like with our facial expressions, verbally, very clear. And when it's a dog, dogs can't do that, right? They're limited. They can't speak to us. So it's really hard to sometimes pick up on how your dog is feeling based on just their body movement, their body language, you know? So it's difficult, you know, especially as a first-time owner. But I'm gonna tell you things that helped me really learn how to pick up on this. So number one is I started to make a super conscious effort in paying attention to what Dante was doing and how he was behaving, depending on the circumstance, environment, or people that we were around. How can your dog be communicating with you, and in what ways? So it's actually, you know, it can be very subtle sometimes, and it can be very blatantly obvious. And sometimes we as owners notice that our dog is uncomfortable in a situation when it's very blatantly obvious. But there are so many things that our dogs do beforehand that tell us how they're feeling. They give us so many little clues. So, for example, are your dog's ears, you know, kind of like tucked back? Is their tail tucked in? Are they kind of just like looking around everywhere? Are they trying to hide behind you, you know, while you're going on a walk? Is your dog has his chest all out and is like completely like fixating on something, on a dog or a person or an object, whatever it may be? Those are all different types of ways that your dog can communicate with how they're feeling. So commonly, if your dog has his tail tucked in, he might be a little bit uncomfortable, a little bit insecure about the situation. Same thing with his ears being back. He's trying to listen to his surroundings. If your dog is, you know, standing upright, you know, his tail is perked up, his chest is all out, that might not be something, that might not be a good sign, because that might mean that he is about to unleash hell and bark the bejesus out of whatever he's staring at, or that he might, you know, charge or anything of that nature. It might mean that your dog is going to lunge soon. Something that I had to pay attention a lot with Dante is him staring at something for too long. If he stared at something for too long, I knew that he was just gonna start to be making things up in his head, like, oh my God, like that person is staring at me for too long. Why is that person staring at me for too long? Is Michelle okay? Like, what's going on here? I'm gonna start barking. So in our everyday outings, if I'm with Dante at a store and I see that Dante is really engaged with me, that he's taking treats, you know, even with all the distractions that are going on, he is kind of like walking with a skip in his step. Those are all good signs and that are telling me, hey, he's having a good time. I know that some people say that if you see your dog panting, that they're actually anxious. And yes, that could mean that your dog is anxious about being in a certain situation. However, it could also mean that your dog is working through that anxiety. But you have to really not just focus on that one aspect of how your dog is feeling at that moment. You have to think about, like, okay, are the things around him too much for him right now? If that's the case, then maybe he needs to decompress somewhere, you know? So it's not necessarily like, oh, he's panting a lot, this is bad. It's more like, okay, what is he trying to tell me about this? You know, he's not feeling very comfortable here. Let's take a little break. So with Dante, the moment that he doesn't take treats from me, if he's not paying attention to me, he's not engaged, we'll leave the store, okay? Even if I had to get something, whatever it may be, because he's telling me, you know what? I'm not comfortable right now, okay? And I'm not going to penalize my dog for that, and I'm not gonna force him to go through a situation like that. If I want him to be in that store for longer, then that means we have to prepare for it more. So that is something that you have to, you know, take into account. Don't force your dog through situations that they're not ready for. Practice, you know, if it takes, with Dante, we had to practice in parking lots a lot first. Then we practice in the entrance of the store. Then we practice inside the store. Then we practice hanging out longer in the store. Same thing with Peach. You know, if Peach is not paying attention to me, if she's blowing me off, if she is breaking her commands constantly, you know, especially during heel, then we're not going to keep healing. If we are in a completely different situation that she's never been to before, I'm not going to be having harsh expectations for her because I haven't prepared her for that. So for example, this past weekend with Peach, I went to visit some friends. We visited Omi, her Dante and Peach's corgi cousin. And where Omi lives, almost close to the city. So there are a lot more cars, there are a lot more noises, there are much higher levels of distractions there. So Peach had a hard time doing heel on, you know, the streets because there was a lot of things that she was distracted by. And in that moment, I wasn't going to be correcting her every single time because we haven't practiced it enough. So it just wouldn't be fair for her. So what we would do a lot is, you know, take breaks in between. If she did like a good heel for like a couple of seconds, I would make her sit, then, you know, give her a break, and then we kept going. Or like I just let her be on break as long as she wasn't dragging me. And but what I mean by she wasn't doing well with heel is that she was kind of like, her head position was past my knee. She wasn't like she wasn't pulling or anything like that, but she was definitely not in the spot that I would have liked her to be in. So, however, I wasn't, you know, being harsh with her because if I wanted it to be a training moment, then I had to stop everything. You have to learn to pick your battles, basically. So what that told me is that Peach needs more practice in areas like that. Now, going back to not forcing your dog through a situation that they are uncomfortable in, this also helps you build trust with your dog. So although you want to be a firm leader, you have to be reasonable and you have to understand in what place of their life your dog is in. So in understanding your dog's body language and understanding how to pick your battles and what your dog is telling you, and if your dog is not prepared to be in a certain situation, you can't force your dog to go through it because it's not going to end up in being a good experience. Maybe your dog can, you know, maintain his obedience, but that doesn't mean that in his heart he's having a good time, and that's not going to create a good relationship. If you want a good relationship, you have to learn how to pick up on what your dog is telling you and do the appropriate thing. That's how you build trust with your dog. Does that mean that you're going to avoid all the things that make them uncomfortable? No, that means that you're going to be a little bit more savvy and you're going to work on things little by little. Just like, you know, when you were in college and you had to write a 12-page paper. What was better? Was it better to work on it within the month before it was due, or was it better to work on it the night before, not get any good sleep, and be extremely stressed for like 12 hours? That's what I'm saying. So it's like, same way with your dog, you know, you have to prepare him. Don't go somewhere and if your dog is feeling uncomfortable, just force them through it. You know, I understand that some people say that dogs work through pressure, but I really believe that, you know, at least Corsos, they're sensitive and they're not a dog that you can be heavy-handed with. You really have to learn good communication and trust with your Corso. So, and in doing it this way, you're teaching your dog how to positively cope with their emotions. You're going to be able to be much better in practicing any kind of obedience that they know, because they'll be more comfortable in order for them to be paying attention and engaged with you. The last part that we need to talk about is the training aspect of your dog and learning to understand your dog. So once you can take into consideration your dog's temperament and you're able to pick up on your dog's body language very well, training becomes such a wonderful tool, especially if you have a dog that's a little bit more on the, overprotective side. So, for example, training is going to teach your dog that just because you are uncomfortable with the situation doesn't mean that you should be barking your brains out. Or just because you are a very friendly dog doesn't mean that you can jump on everybody without their consent. Training is going to help your overprotective dog or your protective dog learn to control their impulses. Because at the end of the day, as the owner of your Cane Corso, you are advocating for them and you are making decisions on your dog's behalf. If it were up to your dog, man, what wouldn't they get, right? Like, if your dog can't make decisions for themselves, that's why they need owners and they need handlers. So this is where it's very important for you to start introducing training. It's going to help your dog tremendously, and I can say that for both Dante and Peach. And speaking of training, if you are interested in building a better relationship with your dog and getting to know your dog on a much deeper level, I highly recommend the courses over at Fenrir. They have a puppy training course as well as a canine boot camp, and in these courses they're literally jam-packed with information. So if you are looking to, just improve your dog's overall behavior, or you just want like a refresher, I highly recommend those courses. I'll leave a link in the description for you guys to check it out. Alright guys, so that's going to conclude the rest of today's video. I hope that you guys found this helpful. I really appreciate all of your support. And just to recap, ways that you can learn to understand your dog's behavior and learn how to read them better, and especially if they are a protective dog breed, is number one, you have to consider their temperament. The second is learning how to pick up on your dog's body language. Once you're able to do this, this is also going to help you understand how to handle your dog in all kinds of situations. And lastly, training. Training is something that's going to really help you in, your relationship with your dog that is a little bit more on the protective side, because it's going to teach your dog how to control their impulses, their instincts, and it's going to help validate you as their owner and as their leader. So yeah, those are all things that were extremely helpful to me as an owner. And those are my tips as well that I can give you as having trained other dogs as well. So yeah, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you guys later. Don't forget to subscribe. That helps our channel tremendously. And also, don't forget to check out our merch. We have a lot of cute things. We have crew necks, t-shirts, stickers. It's a great way to support our channel. So thank you so much. Don't forget to comment, and see you guys later. Bye.